Jonathan.
That's great. Thank you very much, Julie, and good evening and good morning for those of us joining from various different parts of the world. Welcome to the West Midlands Branch meeting of IIRSM. I'm John Hughes, I'm the branch chair. It's great to see you all here taking part in this webinar. Please do enjoy the session. Please do ask away for any questions. You've got your chat box on screen. As Julie outlined, you can unmute at the end of the session and ask questions or post any questions into that chat. So this evening we are joined in the early hours of the morning by Mark Wright and his colleague Terry Swanton from the Health and Safety Index. They're dialing in from Sydney and Melbourne, and it's fantastic to see you two gentlemen this evening, or morning for you, presenting to us on the Health and Safety Index, particularly focused on the Melbourne Grand Prix. Before we move on to Mark and Terry, just a quick update from IIRSM. So if you're not yet signed up, then please do have a look at the IIRSM mentoring platform, either for yourself or any of your colleagues who you think may be interested in either being a mentor or being a mentee. Further information, again, you can find on the IIRSM website. There's been a recent review of membership grades in IIRSM, and there are now various different ways and routes to join the organisation. For example, the fellowship membership route has now got various of the different routes. When I became a fellow of IIRSM, I'd been a member for 5 years and then applied. Well, that process has now changed. So if you would like more information about that, again, onto the website, onto membership, and you can find out the various different routes, not just for fellowship, but for other grades of membership too. Recently, NEBOSH and IIRSM have joined into an alliance, and there's a new risk management qualification that has been launched. Again, this looks really, really interesting. It's obviously fully certified and accredited by NEBOSH. So again, if anyone would like any further information, you can find out details, case studies, etc. on the IIRSM website. Finally, for those on the call who are in the training world and you're interested in being a IIRSM approved training provider, again, there's now a new system out there whereby you can register. You can then have a license to deliver some of the IIRSM training courses. Again, if that's of interest, please do take a look on the IIRSM website. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Mark and Terry. Gentlemen, thanks ever so much for taking the time to join us this evening for us, or this morning for you. I really do appreciate you taking the time, and we very much look forward to hearing the content of your presentation. Mark and Terry, over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Great to hear a little bit more about IIRSM and all of the advances they're making too. So, look, today is all about the Health and Safety Index and sharing a case study on the Australian Grand Prix. We're lucky enough to have Terry Swanton, who was worked directly with the Australian Grand Prix for a number of years. And just by way of disclosure, Terry is now working with us with the Health and Safety Index, and it's great to have him on board to be able to work with us to operate and lead the Health and Safety Index globally and help clients better understand their health and safety needs. So I'll just quickly go through the agenda today. So we'll talk a little bit about the background around the Health and Safety Index, what it means with respect to its benchmarks, and we'll go through a case study, finishing up with a Q&A at the end. So we'd like to think that today is all about sharing information, and hopefully everyone on the call today can take a few little takeaways and learn a little bit more around how that might apply to their organisations. So the Health and Safety Index has been around for a couple of years now. A bit of a backstory. One of the reasons why the Health and Safety Index was developed is that on a personal note, I was getting a little bit despondent with employee engagement surveys not seriously considering health and safety. Often we're asked by organisations to evaluate employee engagement questions where health and safety was an afterthought. And there was a couple of health and safety questions tacked on the end. So look, what we've done is we've created a health and safety survey that also incorporates employee engagement in an integrated way. So it looks at both health and wellbeing and safety aspects. So often organisations might have mental health or psychosocial surveys They may have safety, climate surveys or engagement surveys. What we've done is we've integrated those components. And the beauty of that is that we can understand the interdependencies between all of those elements and help organisations really understand their focus areas. So we operate predominantly in Australia, but we now have partners in the UK, in Europe, and North America as well. You'll see there's a little logo down on the right-hand side of the screen there, and we're lucky to be finalists in the upcoming IIRSM Awards for the Technology Risk Management Initiative of the Year. So fingers crossed to the Health and Safety Index and all the other finalists to look forward to the night. So you can see here are a few of our partners and clients, and we've got some reviews there. You can see that most of our clients are situated in the UK. So that those people on the call today, there are opportunities for people who are working in-house with organisations to partner with us and or our respective partners in those regions. For those consultants on the call, we also have opportunities at the end of this webinar too, just to explain how you can sort of reach out and potentially work out how we can collaborate to help your clients as well. So what's unique about the Health and Safety Index? So look, we spent close to 2 years working with a PhD from Murdoch University, an organisational psychologist, to ensure that the design of the Health and Safety Index survey was statistically reliable and valid. So what that means is that as you seek feedback at scale from your organisation, the benchmark results are statistically reliable, so you can rely on those with a high level of confidence that year on year you're going to get very consistent results to compare time and time again. We also have a business intelligence tool which allows organisations to explore hotspots themselves. What that means is that as organisations move from focusing on lag data and lag indicators through to what's considered leading practices focusing on lead indicators, what we're seeing more and more organisations are using the Health and Safety Index and other technology now to explore in a predictive way what's going to happen in the future. And the beauty of having a statistically reliable benchmark is that you can do that with a higher level of confidence. The design of the Health and Safety Index also allows organisations to put in their own demographic data. So that could be age, gender, geography, business unit, etc. So that then in turn allows organisations to be quite specific and understand various needs they have and inform strategy with the view that rather than taking a blanket approach, a scattergun approach to managing health and safety or guessing where to focus, you can be quite targeted with some of your initiatives and tailor your communication and various projects to specific areas of need. The Health and Safety Index also takes about 10 minutes, so it's relatively short and allows organisations to seek feedback at speed. What I will say too is that this is not an audit tool. You might be familiar with many tools out in the marketplace at the moment that focus on process and rules and systems. This is more around human and organisational factors, and we'll go through some of those in a moment. So Terry, I'll hand things over to you if you like, and you can just explain to the audience a little bit how the Health and Safety Index works.
Yeah, not a problem. Like you said earlier, Mark, it's a really easy tool. So quick 10 minutes. So speaking from a previous user through the Australian Grand Prix Corporation, it was quite easy for us to work with the Health and Safety Index to understand our demographic data, get that captured within the system, and then also engage our workforce to let them understand why we're doing this and what we're doing. And from there, it was quite easy to just send out a link to our people and do a quick index on their phone or their tablet, So it was very easy for us to collect the data at scale.
So in conjunction with sending out a link to organisations to collect the data, what we do in the background for clients and partners is that we use our business intelligence tool to analyse the information, to look at trends and hotspots, and then we feed that back to our stakeholders in really simple data visualization tools, so they can quickly communicate areas of focus. What we'll also go through today a little bit too is the statistically reliable levers that allows organisations to understand where to act to. So you might see the tagline there, we help organisations measure, focus and act. And I think the act piece is really important to help organisations understand where to focus their attention moving forward too. You'll see on the screen there a typical dashboard. So whether the question is either a positive or negative context, the score really represents performance of low through to high performance. And you can see on the top left-hand side of the screen there, a bit of an infographic that allows organisations to understand where their overall performance is. So that's typically an aggregation of all the results within the organisation, providing you an overarching level of performance. At the moment, our benchmark is 74, and what we're seeing is most organisations are scoring between the 60 and 85, or in the lower 80 mark, with the understanding that that information is cut based on various dimensions and aspects. So on the top right-hand side of the screen there, you can see the dimensions. The information you can see here is broken down into typical leadership behaviours, from care and concern, setting expectations, all the way through to providing recognition and response. We also have a seventh dimension that reflects on conditions and experience within the organisation. We'll go through some of these results in a little bit more detail in a practical sense, so you can understand what that actually means in practice with the Australian Grand Prix as well. Down the left-hand side of the screen, we've got the four aspects. So we do look at safety systems. That's more from a user experience perspective. So do personnel have the right access to systems, processes, plant and equipment? Are they user-friendly? As mentioned, we cover off health, wellbeing, leadership, so that individual practices and behaviours, and then broader organisational factors and safety engagement. We also have designed the survey to have both inputs and outputs, and the outputs typically provide what impact that has on the organisation, be that the effect on sleep, engagement, mental health, etc. And you can see on the screen there our benchmark data. So this is real data. We're seeing 2 in 5 people having their sleep negatively impacted due to work. So some of the results you'll see today are a little alarming, I've got to be honest. And although some of the results are concerning, we've also got some good news stories too that Terry will share as well. So Terry, feel free to chime in there as we go through here, particularly as it relates to the Australian Grand Prix. You can see a bit of a heat map here where we break down the data based on the typical location or geographical area. Terry, from your perspective, when using the Health and Safety Index and these heat maps, was there any sort of feedback that you had around your experience as well?
Yeah, when you're looking at that previous slide, I was just thinking then, I remember getting the presentation from the Health and Safety Index and thinking straight away, talking about reliability, it exactly nailed the areas that I was concerned about, but it also highlighted some areas that I wasn't quite aware of, which I think was probably the most powerful part of that tool.
Yeah, awesome. So in terms of our benchmark results, we'll go through a few trends that we're seeing at the moment, comparing data year on year, with the understanding that these are industry benchmarks. They may not be specifically applicable to your organisation, but hopefully you can get a bit of a taste for the power of the Health and Safety Index and what that might mean for you and your organisation too. So out of those four aspects, we've pulled out the leadership data. Now, this was specifically done for a conference that we presented at a few weeks ago now. And it was actually some really surprising results for myself. So you can see here, this is just the safety leadership information. So this is feedback that individuals are providing based on their observation on leadership in their organisation. Now, before you may have recalled that this is not an audit tool and it doesn't focus on process and procedures and the like. We do ask around practices relating to whether people adhere to safety rules and procedures, which scored relatively high. 88% is quite a strong result, through to, you can see, 51 having visible leadership in the field from senior managers. So I guess my interpretation of this is that as organisations try and build a high performance culture, focusing on rules and compliance may not necessarily give you the biggest return on investment. And where people really struggle to shift the dial is around trying to engage individuals, and particularly senior managers, to have effective conversations, to really delve in to understand how people are thinking and feeling on a day-to-day basis. Now, there's a range of different questions here. We won't go through them all, but to give you a bit of a sense where organisations are struggling, we can then present this data back in a similar way to your organisation to understand your specific areas of need too. So Terry, from your perspective, I know we'll go through some of these results at the moment, but does this sort of ring true from your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things we found was looking at some of these questions where we didn't score quite well really allowed us to uncover some areas there we weren't aware of, and really help us dial in with our strategy, which was quite valuable.
And in terms of, I guess, your experience in using it, I know human nature often goes to the bottom and the poor results. Were you able to leverage some of the things that were working well and try and do more of that as well?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because naturally you do go to, where aren't we performing and what do we need to work on? But one thing I do recall was working with the product manager at the Index. He was making very sure that we did focus on what was working well and make sure we celebrate that. So that was one thing that I remember we sat down and we looked at, okay, well, this is where we need to work on to help us move forward, but also let's celebrate what's working really well and help with our culture as well.
Yeah, and look, what we're often seeing is that there's a bit of a mismatch between what people want to do in terms of really strong values and beliefs, and what actually happens in real life. So what's playing out. So what we help organisations do is understand, well, what are the barriers getting in the way between what people want to do, and what are the practices that are playing out. So with respect to some of those more positive results around people demonstrating care and concern, or wanting to have really strong beliefs, we leverage those strong attributes around supervisor support or whatever it might be, then to factor to work on things that are not working as well. So the previous slide was around just performance, and this slide is really looking at a comparison between 2020 and 21. So you can see there was quite a shift, personnel actively participating in health and safety in their workplace, through to, you can see some of the more positive changes there around supervisors finding workable solutions and not casting blame. So I actually asked a few of my clients, is this, indicative of their experience? And the feedback that we've getting based on this data is that COVID's had a huge impact on people being able to actively engage in person. Sydney and Melbourne in particular went through some horrific isolation and lockdown periods. So like many parts of the world. And I think that's sort of representing here in some of the results that we're seeing in the Health and Safety Index. With the Australian Grand Prix, were there many challenges that you had, Terry, in those periods where there was those huge lockdown periods?
Look, it was a little bit different for us at the time because we were able to get exemptions through the professional sporting ruling for the government here. So, yeah, we were able to meet up depending on the work that was to be done. We could have some engagement there. So, during the lockdown period in Melbourne, to give you some background with the Australian Grand Prix, they have a storage yard where essentially the whole Grand Prix infrastructure is kept through the year, and that needed to be maintained. And that's probably where the most risk is during the off season, as we call it. So we were able to go out there, engage with their workforce through that measure, but through the BAU and the risk revolving around BAU, that was a challenge. However, the Grand Prix, as we saw through the data, had a huge care and concern. So I think they did really well in that period to make sure that the mental health and well-being was a focus for all of us. So that was a big plus for them.
Yeah, great. Well, look, we'll go through that data in a second as well, just to help people better understand that as well. So as indicated, the Health and Safety Index is an integrated tool. Now, the beauty of having this level of integration, we can start to see the impact on certain practices and behaviours impacting on both health and safety. Now, that's not only great for the health and safety or risk health and safety practitioner, but it also informs the operations and senior managers too, in terms of not only demonstrating due diligence, but also informing them on how to make effective decisions across their organisation. So we've spent a fair bit of time looking at different research around mental health and wellbeing, and what we've applied here is the job demand job resource model, which is, there's a huge amount of resource around this where there's a mismatch between job demands and job resources. There's usually some sort of impact on the worker. And you can see some examples of that, job demands being time pressure, bullying or criticism, resources around people feeling comfortable talking around mental health or support from their organisation or supervisors. So as you might appreciate, having stressors in your organisation is quite normal, but where that stressor becomes quite significant, or there's a huge mismatch between the resources and support available in the organisation, what we're seeing is those results playing out and the impact on workers, in particular their sleep, their engagement, and their mental health. So you can see some of those scores there. This is real benchmark data, 55 and 48%. These aren't great scores, unfortunately. So these are really at the lower end of the Health and Safety Index results. Time pressures, you can see 52% isn't great at all. And that's really a good examples where I think organisations can take this and say, well, what is the impact on their organisation and workers around time? Is there a safety impact? Is it a mental health and wellbeing impact? Is it an engagement impact? And you can start to see, as we start to explore different trends and help organisations unpack their results, the impact of certain questions and what the organisation are essentially telling them their experiences are.
And what might be interesting, Mark, is as we do the benchmark data in years to come, is that data going to change as the world escapes from COVID, or hopefully it keeps escaping from COVID? Because I know at the time there was a lot of people, and there still are a lot of people suffering sleep issues from that COVID period. So it's going to be interesting to watch the benchmark data over the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share this contractor slide, Terry, and I know that you've had a huge amount of experience with contractor management. and sort of indicated, we can put in an unlimited amount of demographic data into the question sets for organisations. And here's just a quick example of, we won't go through all of the results in detail, but you can see here the comparison between the general population of employees and contractors. So I'm not sure, Terry, were there many contractors for the Australian Grand Prix?
Oh, there's a lot, yeah. So the Australian Grand Prix normally has around 65 to 75 staff. Now, when the event comes around to being built, they engage a contractor to build the event, but also there's a lot of activations happening through the event. So there's an absolute lot of contractors. We haven't used the health and safety index for contractors yet at the Australian Grand Prix, but I think that's the next step for them.
Yeah, right, okay. And you can see here some of the typical results here around taking shortcuts, compromising safety and violations.
Hi there, folks. I seem to have lost the audio there with Mark. Terry, can you still hear us okay?
I think we've lost Terry momentarily as well. I'm not sure what's happened there. Maybe just give them a couple of minutes to reconnect.
Yeah, that's fine. Whilst it's reconnecting, if anyone's got any questions, please do feel free to pop those into the chat box. Again, Mark, Terry, not sure whether you can still hear us, but we've lost your audio. We can't hear you.
Hi, have you got me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now. That's great.
Okay, excellent. I'm not sure what happened there. Let me just check in with Mark. Okay, so Mark will be trying to dial back in. Not sure what's happened there. So let's move forward anyway. So to give you a bit of a background, we're going to talk about the Australian Grand Prix now and how we use the Health and Safety Index at the time. So like Mark said earlier, I'm now currently working for the Health and Safety Index, so full disclosure there. But at the time in 2020, I was the Risk and Safety Manager for the Grand Prix and used the index there. So for a bit of background, in 2019, as we know, the world was a very different place to what it is now. So you can see there that's Valtteri Bottas at the 2019 Australian Grand Prix. All went well. And then we moved forward to the 2020 Grand Prix, which was definitely an interesting experience. So to give you a bit of background, we heard about COVID in the weeks leading up to the event. So as the rest of the world, we were probably thinking, oh, this won't be anything too serious here in Australia. We'll be fine. And what was quite interesting was leading up to the event, we were doing some work in the background on COVID-19 management. And again, this was early March 2020, so the world wasn't quite aware of what was to come. And if we can just go back to the previous slide. Or is that Mark driving that? Might be Mark driving that. So we were doing some planning, like I said, for COVID-19, but it wasn't, no one was aware of what was to come. So again, it was quite, I'm going to say, organic. There was some planning there. So we had hand sanitizer and signage and things like that, but it was nothing to what we knew was coming to what we do now. So a very different space. And what was quite difficult for us at the Australian Grand Prix is the week before there was a concert at the MCG with the Women's World Cup, and there was Katy Perry there. There was 80 or 90,000 people at the event. It was an amazing event. Now, at that stage, COVID was just landing in Australia, and we thought we were going to be fine for the event. So it was all systems go. You might have seen in the news, the CEO, Andrew Westacott, was coming out saying it was all systems go, and it really was. Until the Thursday happened. So the gates opened, we had people coming into the event, and then it turned into some concern when there was some issues happening with one of the teams being McLaren. And then, as you know, Friday came around and the event got cancelled. So if we can just go back to the previous slides. Jonathan, you driving those slides?
I'm not. No, it's Mark's screen that we can see at the minute.
Oh, okay. Not sure if Mark can hear me or not. Just to give you a bit of background context, so the Australian Grand Prix Corporation at the time, obviously the event got cancelled on the Friday, and it was the company needed to go into crisis mode, as you can imagine. So the reason I'm telling you this is just to give you a bit of context around the Health and Safety Index and some of the results. Now, the Health and Safety Index was used in 2020 by myself, and some of the data is on there, but I might need to use my screen to talk about some of the previous slides. But then they also did the Health and Safety Index in 2021. Now, one of the pictures I had on here on the earlier slide was in the Australian Grand Prix was postponed in 2021, and it was put back to November. Now, through that year, we had some huge lockdowns. A lot of the staff obviously had some concerns around their own health and well-being, mental health during that stage. And then we found out the event was cancelled for the year. So the reason I'm saying this is some of the data there on mental health and well-being was it was quite interesting because the people behind the scenes were going through quite a lot. So they're riding the roller coaster of having a new event coming, event postponed, event cancelled. So it's quite a roller coaster in the background. Now we're going to look at some of the data. Now Mark's gone forward. I don't think Mark can hear me. So some of the data there that we had. Now you can't see this slide, but it says here that at the time we were looking in 2020, we were developing. So our health and safety index score was around 61 to 70%. And then in 2021, the Australian Grand Prix Corporation did the health and safety index again and moved up to 71 to 80% being capable. So there was a 6% increase there, which was quite substantial for the Australian Grand Prix. And again, for me, it's quite interesting knowing that where we were in 2020 as an organisation and the challenges that we had internally versus 2021, where there was still some significant challenges. The fact they were able to go up 6% is amazing. And the reason behind that is we saw the data from the health and safety index. We were able to stop, look at that data, and essentially change our strategy and health and risk and safety action plan, which included some of the actions from this. So I know Mark's going forward on the screen here, but I'm looking at my screen here. So some of the improvements we had was in 2020, our safety engagement went up 11%. In 2021, the safety of leadership went up 11%. Health and wellbeing only went up 3%. Now, we did a lot of work in this space, and the Australian Grand Prix were fantastic in the health and wellbeing space. However, some of the drivers there is being a major events company. For those of you who have worked in major events, I know a lot of people have been to major events, but sleep and wellbeing is often one of the first things to go to deliver the event. And that was one of the challenges for us at the time is how do we look after our people and get our people to change their values when they need to deliver an event? So for those of you who haven't worked in a major event, the train doesn't stop. It doesn't matter how ready you are or how tired you are, the date comes, and it's quite a big stressor. One of the more interesting things, and this is particularly around my time, was the health and safety systems went up 8% during that time because we found that there was a few system issues there, particularly around our storage yard and the contractor management side of things. So a whole heap of work was done there. And it was interesting using the health and safety index. There was a few things there that we found from our storage yard that we weren't quite aware of. And using the index as a diagnostic tool was really helpful for that. Okay, so the previous slide to this one as well. So looking again, 2020 versus 2021. Sorry, Mark's going through the screen. So some of the negatives here were 19% of saying that they don't recommend people to work at the organisation. Now, this was at a time when the organisation was going through a crisis. Bullying and criticism was also an issue. Time pressures were an issue, and that's a big one, like I said before, in employee engagement. In the event space. Now, some of the positives there were senior managers' visible safety conversations. So it was really important for us to make sure our senior management were involved. And that was one of the things we found through the index was there's some great conversations happening at a senior level, but at the lower level, were they connected? And in that middle level, was there conversations going all the way through? Staff, another positive was staff felt empowered to stop unsafe work. Training was another a positive outcome, and workers' ownership of safety was another positive there. So Mark hasn't got the slide up here, but some of the levers for action for 2022, 2023. With the Health and Safety Index, with the report they give you levers for action. So for the Australian Grand Prix, some of the levers for action were around safety systems, so accountability. So making sure that the organisation holds workers accountable for unacceptable safety behaviours. The next one here is expectations. So making sure that we're not setting unclear health and safety expectations during the induction process. Now, that's a really critical one, the induction process for the Australian Grand Prix, because you've got, sorry, was that someone talking? So we've got inductions for the staff. We've got inductions for the storage yard team, which is quite critical. You've got inductions for the contractor who's building the event. You've got inductions for contractors and those coming in for the event to do specific activations. So, for example, the Red Bull team, so the Red Bull organisation might be coming in to do an activation on site. They're doing a build. Inductions are quite important, setting those expectations. But also, as the event comes forward, there's hundreds of staff coming in for the Australian Grand Prix to deliver the event and making sure that we set the health and safety expectations there. So that was a really, really critical one. Other levers for action in 2022, 2023 are safety leadership. So making sure that the values and beliefs are there for colleagues not to compromise safety in order to take a shortcut. Now, in the major event space, it's a really, really challenging one not to take shortcuts when you've got deliverables and you've got timelines that are critical. It's a really, really hard one. I know organisations like in construction, they've got timelines that are critical, but the major event space is a whole different world because the race is starting at 4 o'clock and the race is going to start no matter what. So it's a really tricky one. Accountability. So workers to hold each other accountable for unacceptable safety behaviours is another a focus for them. Health and wellbeing.
Terry, sorry, just to cut in there. It's John here. We had a bit of a problem with the technology. We can't see any background slides now, but I understand you've now got access to that. So hopefully something on your screen should enable you to share the slides that you're looking at.
Yes, that'll be much better.
So Terry, can you hear me?
Oh yes, Mark's back. Sorry Mark.
Yeah, we
really don't know what happened there.
Sorry, Mark. Not sure what happened there, but as I was talking, I think you were going through the slides a little bit quicker. So where we're up to now is the levers for action.
That's great. We can see that now, Terry. That's great. Thank you.
Great. Can you see the screen, Mark?
I can. Fantastic.
Excellent. Was there anything you wanted to jump in, Mark, and add in?
No, look, I'll let you continue, Terry.
Yep, fantastic. So sorry everyone for the technical issues. Not sure what was happening there, but we're back on deck now by the looks of it. So safety engagement, so values and beliefs. Work colleagues compromise safety to take a shortcut and walk past unacceptable behaviours without stopping. And again, like I said, in the major event space, it's a really tricky one to get people to stop and implement the right behaviours and making sure that the process is followed. When again, like I said, in a major event, when the train's coming for the race to start or the ball to bounce, it's a really tricky one. And the last one there around health and wellbeing, change management, so worker consultation on planned changes. So at the time for the Australian Grand Prix and even now during the Australian Grand Prix, the amount of change that was happening in 2020 and 2021, this is a real focus area to make sure that workers are consulted on planned changes. And one of the really tricky ones as well was job control and unrealistic time pressures. So as you can imagine, that Albert Park, for those of you not been there, for most of the year, Albert Park is just a quiet community park for the community to use. And then once the Grand Prix comes around, it needs to be built, and the time pressures there can be quite significant, not only during the build, but also afterwards. They need to give the park back to the community. So the time pressures there are quite challenging. Would you like to add anything here, Mark, this slide for levers for action?
Look, I think from what I recall, there was some material changes that the Australian Grand Prix made around decision making. Given that I was sort of cut off a moment ago, have you spoken a little bit about some of the changes they made around decision making and empowering people to make their own decisions?
No, not yet. So one of the biggest things we did was we looked at our health and safety index report, and there was quite a few things there that we wanted to work on. Not only things that were concerning, but just things that we needed to push us to the next level. And what we did from that is we developed a risk and safety action plan for the organisation probably a couple of months before that, and then we incorporated the findings from this into actions for their risk and safety action plan. And from my recollection, one of the biggest changes the organisation did make was around the decision making and time pressures. What they did was they set up a senior leadership team, because basically what was happening was we had people on the ground trying to make decisions with some pretty harsh time pressures, as I've said before, and then they couldn't quite make decisions quickly because all the decisions were going to a small team at the top, being the executive team, who were getting swamped, and they always do get swamped because the thing is, with the major event, there's always things changing last minute. It's a really difficult one to manage, and especially during this COVID time. So what they decided to do was to set up a senior leadership team, which wasn't quite the executive, but wasn't the general staff, but made up of that mid to senior management. And basically what they were doing is they were catching up on a regular basis and covering off items that we did pick up through our risk and safety improvement plan, and also through the health and safety index. So they had to get together regularly and hopefully try and solve issues that were happening from an organisational level without having to go through to the senior management. So what that did there is it allowed a group to be empowered to make decisions, but also sped up the process too, which helped with those time pressures. Alrighty, we might move forward. So you can see here we've got a review from the Australian Grand Prix. Now this is Violet Nicola, who's the Australian Grand Prix Risk and Safety Coordinator. So Violet's been at the Grand Prix for a couple of years now, but she's only just been able to run her first event, which is exciting. So I saw Violet the other day, and she was running around and doing all the exciting things at the Grand Prix, and she really enjoyed her first event. But Violet was around in 2021 and helped use the index again. So Violet said here, the AGPC have conducted the Health and Safety Index survey 2 years in a row now. This allowed us to measure safety performance and identify key areas of risks. We were able to use this feedback to provide them the safe systems of work. So like we said earlier, the systems was a really big focus for the Australian Grand Prix in 2020 and continues to do so moving forward. Anything you'd like to add here, Mark?
Look, I think it just reinforces the fact by focusing on those critical few areas around the levers that it does enable organisations just to focus on those specific areas of need. As you're talking there, Terry, as well, there are a couple of questions coming through on the chat as well. Have you responded to any of those questions yet, as I was offline?
No.
So
let's get into those now.
There's a question here from John. Can the tool be used as an app, or is it web-based? So our survey tool is both web-based and mobile app enabled, so allows people to be able to complete the survey in the field if need be on the run. There's also a question here from David. Talking around analysing, is there an ability to analyse data with contractors and subcontractors to compare differences? Yeah, look, absolutely, David. So good question. Before there was a slide purely on contractors, but if you were to push that down the supply chain even further to subcontractors or secondary subcontractors, there's nothing stopping you from having specific demographic data that is tailored to your organisation to be able to analyse that information. And the third one here from Tony, is the Health and Safety Index engaged by contractors at the F1 and teams alike? So Terry, from memory, you said at the time the Health and Safety Index was used in the Australian Grand Prix. Contractors weren't used, but they were potentially looking at using that again when the timing was right with contractors. Is that right?
Yeah, that's definitely the next evolution for them. So at the time, like many of our clients, so they use the index and they have that aha moment. Oh, this would have been great to use for our contractors as well. So the Australian Grand Prix has got a really close relationship with their major contractors, and it'd be great to get their feedback. Regarding the F1 teams, no, they don't currently engage the F1 team. So it's important to know that the Australian Grand Prix Corporation has their own contractors who build the event. The F1 is completely separate to that. However, personally speaking, I'd love to see the index used across Formula One, the organisation and the teams, because it'd be really interesting to get some of the data, particularly around health and wellbeing, as these people fly in, fly out of countries, pack up, the whole team in an event, and it's really quite challenging. And I'd love to see that data.
That's great. Alrighty. Thanks, Terry. There's a couple of other questions that have also come in on the chat. I've got one here. It's from, so I can't see the name immediately, but in my experience of dealing with events management, they have ideas that are not necessarily with health and safety at the forefront of their concerns. How do you deal with this in such a large event like the Australian Grand Prix?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really tough one. I think one thing that we found at the Australian Grand Prix is the care and concern was there. However, like I said earlier, when the event rolls around, the care and concern is still there for people, but there's a job to be done, and it's quite hard to maintain that balance. So one thing we tried to do, we did do at the Australian Grand Prix during my time, was we set up some risks champions across the business. So what was happening at the time was everything risk and safety related was coming to the risk and safety department, and there wasn't that integration across the company. So what we did is we spoke to every department, and what we did was we identified all of their key risks specific to their BAU and their event time. We educated those teams on what the risks were, what the controls needed to be, and then we identified a risk champion to lead that. Now, what was quite interesting is I mentioned before that there was a senior leadership team established. So that senior leadership representative for each department was paired with a risk champion for the department. So we were able to have regular meetings through the COVID lockdown, online right up until the event recently, where they were having meetings with the senior leadership team, the risk champion, and also the risk and safety team to really drive home that message of safety during the event. So again, I'm not working there at the moment, so I wasn't a part of it this year. But from what I have heard, that the culture is definitely improving in that space around safety during the event and making sure that we're looking after each other.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Terry. In your time that you were working there directly, you've got 180,000 fans, you've got the build leading up to the event, you've got the event itself. What kept you awake at night the most?
I think the thing that kept me awake the most was fatigue management. That was the challenging one for me. We have fatigue management from a point of view from our contractors working big hours to get the event done, to using heavy vehicles down the chain as well. That was a concern for me, but it was people working some pretty big hours, and the reason they're doing that is for the community and for the sport. They want to deliver the biggest and best event possible, but often it was putting themselves second. So one of the biggest challenges for me was how do we bring fatigue to the forefront and make sure that it's being managed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If you're refitting a retail unit, for example, then it's not uncommon for there to be some overrun, some delays in the project. When you're building an event like this, it's absolute time critical, isn't it? Yeah, the race is happening, and so what level of tolerance is kind of built into that? You have to deal with any unexpected events that may come your way.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we did, and they still continue to do, is hold readiness sessions. So there's a lot of moving parts at the Grand Prix, and it is a circus, and it's a lot of fun, but with the circus comes a lot of complexity. So what we did was we held a readiness session from the risk and safety team and the operations team with all the departments. So we would sit down and say, look, what are your deliverables? Are you on track, off track? Who do you need to liaise with? Now, that was happening from weeks out from the event. So that's one thing we did to make sure that the conversation was always happening around where are we at, where do you need help, what needs to be done, so there was no surprises. But there was always one or two things that did sneak through, as you can imagine.
Yeah. With the health and safety index, what would you say has been the biggest tangible benefit for using that service?
Yeah, like for me, it was the unknown. So, like I said at the start of this webinar, there was a lot of things that came through the data from the index where I said, yes, that's exactly what's happening, and that's, now I've got some data because I had conversations, I had gut feel, but now I had some data to support that. But for me, it was some of those unknowns that came through. Like Mark said before, there was some information around people's sleeping patterns or any other information like that where you're able to sit down and go, wow, I didn't realize that was happening and I need to uncover this a bit further. And one thing I really liked around the index as well, it gave some feedback around, keep doing, start doing, stop doing. I felt that was really valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from a health and safety and risk management perspective, we are that central spoke in the middle of a wheel here. It touches all departments across an organisation. I guess this particularly, you have quite a close working relationship with your colleagues in HR. A number of the question sets that are in here are quite well aligned to HR, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up because what I found this did do was once we did the health and safety index, it gave me a really good tool to sit down with the HR team, and it actually really helped our relationship progress, using this data and saying, right, we've got this here from. The idea was to look at it from a risk and safety point of view. However, it does capture, our employee engagement as well. So let's have a look at that and work together. So I recall they had some actions come through from the index as well, which is great.
Yeah, fantastic. Does anybody have any other questions for Mark and Terry?
Just while people are thinking here, might be worth looking at the QR codes that are here. If anyone wants to book a demo, feel free to scan that QR code. I know we're all used to scanning QR codes now. You can scan the QR code there and book a time to have a demo. We'll take you through the index in a lot more detail. And Mark said at the start of this call too, if there's any consultants on the call that want to partner with us and use the index for their clients, you can scan that as well, and that'll take you through to our partner page.
Yeah, okay, Terry, that's great, thank you. Just checking to see if we've had any more questions come through. No, I don't think so. Julia, have people got the opportunity to unmute and ask any questions directly?
Yes, they have.
Great, if anyone has got anything they'd like to ask, now's your chance. Another question comes through from David. It says aligning results with tried and tested learning opportunities would be a good move.
Yeah, look, that makes a lot of sense, I think, particularly as you start to analyse the results. There's an opportunity for you to innovate, test and reapply some of that thinking and compare results over time.
And I think one thing there, Mark, is looking at the good results and stop and go, okay, well, what are we doing now that is working? And those, tried and tested things that we don't need to change.
Yeah, that's grand. Mark, Terry, thanks very much for your time. I think that's it for the questions we've had so far. Was there anything else in your presentation?
That's it for today. There's an opportunity, I think, for people to, as Terry said, to connect with us. We've also got lots of resources on our website too, so jump on our website and have a bit of a look at some of the downloadables. We've got a bit of research there and a few case studies too. People might get some learning from that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Mark, Terry, on behalf of the IIRSM West Midlands Branch, we really do appreciate you taking the time, particularly dialing in from Melbourne and Sydney to talk to us in the early hours of the morning for you and this evening for us here. So really do appreciate that. Thank you very much. The session has been recorded, so people can listen back to this. Again, there's links in the QR codes on screen there if people want any further information from the Health and Safety Index. For everyone who's joined the webinar, thank you again for taking the time to join us. Please do take a look out on the IIRSM West Midlands Branch LinkedIn page or our page via the IIRSM website, where you can find out the details of upcoming events. We always meet the second Thursday in the month. And in the near future, we'll be moving towards some face-to-face events too. That's a good range of speakers and events lined up over the coming few months. Well, that's it for this evening, folks. Thanks ever so much for joining us. For those who've got Easter coming up, and have a good long weekend. Try not to eat too many chocolate Easter eggs, and we'll speak soon. Take care. All the very best. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.